Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Luke Goetting. And he actually comes from the one fabulous city of Austin, Texas. And he is a keynote speaker on Gen Z engagement retention. He's also he's an influencer. He's also a founder of a creative agency. We'll talk all about it. And I'm really happy to have him on the show for the audience interested in speaking, influencing and especially towards the Gen Z cohort. So, Luke, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christopher. It's an honor to be here. And, with all the initials after your last name, all the certifications, feeling a little bit intimidated, but I'll do my best to contribute value for everyone today.
Yeah, I like to keep the podcast informal and informal. So, all my friends call me Chris. So please do the same. And conversations raw, authentic, no, and so yeah, talk briefly about, what you do, how you got there, and how the audience can benefit from your fabulous expertise.
Absolutely. I feel like the connecting thread in my career has been communications. My first job out of college was in outside sales. And I kind of just I was based in Minneapolis, and my company never had a Midwest sales manager, sales rep. And so they kind of just started throwing me out there. I was traveling all over the Midwest, exotic places like Omaha, all the way over to Pittsburgh. I think I had like 13 states at one point. What I quickly realized was that when I was giving my presentations, largely I was meeting with our dealer network we were a manufacturer. I realized that my PowerPoint, my slideshow, was like the top asset that I was leveraging in my career. And so I quickly got interested in meeting dynamics. How can I get away from, the first year or so? I really just gave the kind of standard one-way talk where it's just I come show my information and then leave. And I felt like I was really missing out on any conversations. And so I continued tinkering, engineering it, and eventually got really into conversational presentations, interactive presentations. I got really into a tool called Prezi. Did you ever use Prezi, Chris?
No, what is that?
It was a cloud-based presentation tool, kind of a precursor. It was side by side with PowerPoint and Google Slides for a bit. But one of the things I really loved about it was you could zoom in and out. So it had an ability to do like a spatial visualizations. So all that to say, I got really into Prezi. I quit my job, started using that tool, trying to consult back to the industry I'd come from. That wasn't going super well, but by luck, one of my presentations ended up winning the Best Business Prezi of the Year award. And so I got this international exposure. I got featured on their website. 3 to 6 months later, I got certified as an expert. So it was a really great partnership where we were getting leads because of I was getting leads because of my expertise in this software. And so that became an accidental agency. I've been doing that over 10 years. So my company, Puffingston Presentations, we help companies from a variety of industries, especially tech, when their executives are speaking at a high impact conference or they need a really compelling sales deck. That's what my company does. We help them create really visually impactful messages in that sense. But during the pandemic, we went through a lot of challenges because we were largely getting our spirit from our clients from events, which, as we all know, got really disrupted. But also, I'd been doing it close to 10 years at that point, and I started to feel the itch like I need to start putting some of these principles back into practice. Like, there's only so much that my clients are willing to do versus what I'm willing to experiment with as I'm speaking. And so, yeah, for the last 6 to 9 months, I have been back out on the speaking circuit. I've already given 30-ish presentations in 2024. Have another 20 to 30 queued up for the second half of the year. And I'm speaking about how companies and leaders can better connect with Gen Z in the workforce, kind of positioning myself as a millennial who can be like a liaison between both sides, both generation or all the generations. Seeing as I have a lot of experience onboarding and training our creatives in at my agency, and also applying some of the top level insights and research that's emerging about the new generation. So yeah, like I said, long-winded, but overall, I think the connecting theme is communications and connecting with our audiences and with our clients. How can we create better dynamics in those worlds?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And so we'll talk about especially the Gen Z cohort and millennials were kind of the first to kind of buck the traditional trends of the boomers and the older part of Gen X. So one thing overall, what is Gen Z's approach to life and work, and how is it different from millennials and Gen Xers, and what impact does this have on the modern workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, of course, one we could knock out for an hour on itself. But the high level or the top element I would key in on is this idea of quote unquote digital native. And I know that phrase gets thrown out a lot, and it's seemingly intuitive. So we all kind of nod our heads, like, yeah, digital native generation makes sense. But I feel like there's a lot of psychology resulting from that affects how Gen Z interacts with the workforce. So, for example, Gen Z was born, the internet was very much up and running by the time they were born. And by the way, quick definition for our listeners, this is the generation born between 1997 and 2010, meaning the oldest Gen Zs are already now 27 years old. I feel like sometimes they're still perceived as just the baby interns. But yeah, they're becoming managers now. They're becoming leaders of organizations. But yeah, that digital nativity, they're very much used to, for example, access to information. Which of course, in many ways, especially in medical is a great example of information is extremely need to know, is extremely siloed. Not only just for patient records, which obviously should be, but like just generally this kind of corporate atmosphere of we're going to kind of keep things from our employees. And so Gen Z is not used to that. And it can be really challenging for them not to have a seat at the table, not being able to contribute their ideas and conversations. And speaking of that seat at the table, they are used to participating through the internet. They've been able to post and share their comments since as early as they could log in. They're used to getting other information from other people around the world. And that extends to, again, the workforce where they're wanting to know, why are we doing this? This is a kind of a classic challenge employers often speak about with Gen Z. It's like they always ask the why, and it can be really annoying. But I would emphasize, in general, they're trying to get more context. They're trying to better assess, why is this the way we do this? Can I make improvements? Can I do it more effectively and more efficiently? Not just that they're lazy and entitled. So there's a lot more to that digital native spirit, but those are just some quick examples. Access to information, high touch kind of communications that they're just come so instinctive to them. Communications that are digital, that are not just face-to-face conversations. All this comes very natural to them. And oftentimes is very different from how other generations interact.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I'm kind of I'm on the cusp with Gen X millennial, and I mean I'm more identified with millennials, but it's interesting because I was reading this where 70% of most people are fed up with the political, educational, financial, transportational, healthcare. They're fed up with the system. They know it doesn't work, and like they're trying to change. And what's really interesting is like, a couple of my friends though, they were talking about, in my generation, getting fired from a job was like that was that taboo. And then now Gen Zs, they're like, yeah, I'll just fire myself. I won't show up if it doesn't resonate with my values, or if they're destroying the environment, or harming women or, children, minorities. They're like, I'm not going to work for these people. So, which is kind of interesting because, you speak to these Gen Z cohort and, we talked about this. And so, what does this have to do, in terms of careers, workplace, and, especially social issues like, inequality, diversity, inclusion, all of these? How does that fit in?
Yeah, it's another great question. I'm going to tackle it in two parts. So remind me to come back to values because I think that's a very, very important conversation. But I first want to key in on, you kind of indicated the idea of turnover, or we had this great resignation period that kind of yielded in the last year or so. But prior, we were seeing turnover rates as high as voluntary turnover rates as high as we ever had before. So the point I'd make there is, again, Gen Z has probably the most access to information as any generation ever. They know what their peers are making. They know what other organizations in their field or outside of their industry are doing. They are very used to communicating. The idea of like salary transparency, that's something they're very comfortable with. And I'd really stress there is a rationale behind most of these. They get called lazy or the flaky. They just want to leave. They see in many cases that people who leave, which statistically Gen Z does every 2 years, they see that oftentimes people who leave, what do they get? A promotion, a raise at the company that they went to. Maybe do that again in 2 to 3 years. And they see that oftentimes people who are playing that game are having better financial and economic outcomes than the people who were, quote unquote, loyal to their organization. And pair that with, again, the generation has a very clear understanding of these workplace dynamics because they grew up, the oldest Gen Zs grew up, they were like 12 or 13 during the Great Recession of like 2008. It went on for many years, as we all know. They had their lives extremely disrupted by the pandemic. Again, in 2020, also saw mass layoffs there. And then in certain industries, even the last year, especially in tech, we're seeing more mass layoffs. So Gen Z is just coming at it with a very sober perspective that the spirit of employer-employee loyalty, it's not there anymore. It's broad strokes. So there are many great employers out there, but companies really have to put in the work beyond, to your point. It's not just a job, and you should stay there, plop in that role for 5 or 10 years at a time. Happy to talk values too, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was also there's another statistic like millennials and Gen Z they'll pay more for brands that resonate with their values. Like, they'll pay more for coffee, or if it's like if it's like good for the environment, or if it's doing a good cause, and they'll go to support these and a lot of them are phased out of the traditional financial system, so they have to figure out new ways of doing these things. And no offense, because my parents are boomers, but it's really time to kind of transition away from, we really have to start innovating and upgrading our thinking and our systems. So we have around 5-7 minutes. What strategies can businesses implement to bridge the generation gap and create a harmonious multi-generation workforce? Because, for example, now boomers have to work later. A lot of them can't retire. A lot of them are living longer. So how do you bridge these within the workforce? We also have more options. We got work from home, we got social media, we can e-commerce, all these different options.
Exactly. Yeah. So first I want to acknowledge it's a tremendous challenge because we've never really, to this date in human history, had like 60 to 80 years worth of people who've joined the workforce like in that different range. That's a huge challenge. We still have the silent generation at 1% to 2% of the workforce, including our president. So yeah,
It's time for him to retire.
yeah, that could very much be the case too. So yeah, it's very much a challenge. A few things that come to mind for me. Again, I mentioned this access to information. I think leading with why is as important as ever. Gen Z has so many options available to them, and we didn't even talk about the gig economy. In addition to all these other entry-level roles, you can just, as you mentioned, like kind of just stop working and, oh, I'll just start doing like Uber delivery tomorrow. Like, it's that easy to start grabbing onto some of these side hustles. And so what we got, obviously having competitive salary, having competitive benefits, that's always a part of the conversation. But what can we do to really tie into their sense of purpose, which Gen Z experiences at statistically the highest rates of any generation in the workforce right now? Things like climate and sustainability are absolutely top of mind for them. You mentioned they will pay extra or invest in brands that embrace that. Fair enough. They have legitimate concerns about when they hit 70, when they hit 80, who knows how long people will be living. What is the world going to look like at that point? Are we going to have just these extreme weather events just get more and more prevalent? So that's a major one. This is also the most diverse generation to date. So things like diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, really important to Gen Z. And again, I have to mention, as digital natives, I feel like they're pretty good at kind of sussing out the BS meter, if you will. As in, you see all these companies who have these nice posters of all their values, and then they take a look at the executive team, and oh, it's all men, or it's all of a certain race. And they're like, yeah, I'm not really seeing that diversity play out throughout the org, and they're very aware of that. So yeah, I think it really goes beyond. It comes down to this spirit of we really need to outline to our employees and to our teams, like, what is the value of you staying here? What are the opportunities? Yes, obviously there's if you go somewhere else, you'll probably learn a lot. But if you stay here, here's my pitch to you. And again, that's kind of not the instinct of a lot of people who are used to the job, the employer. That's who we really cherish. But like, okay, if you were to stay another 6 months, like, here's the opportunity. Here's the next year or two. This is where we can take you. And I also like this spirit of the idea of gamification, gamifying the career, badges, levels, points, things that can help people see they're actually making some serious progress here, and there's more opportunities in the future. The last thing I should make sure to mention is mentoring. Obviously, we all know the potential value in mentoring, but I would really stress, to me, the best atmospheres are ones that are very two-way, sometimes referred to as co-mentoring or reverse mentoring, where it's not just the most senior generations and employees speaking at Gen Z, but we're also creating two-way conversations because, of course, they have a lot of ideas and insights that they can bring to the table. So often, the last point I'll make is just like, the conversation has turned so much in many ways to like negativity. They're lazy, they're entitled. We heard it said about millennials. Same kind of stuff is being said about Gen Z. It just creates such a toxic atmosphere. And naturally, people who are hearing that are not going to be super willing to connect and be positive team players with other generations if they feel like that's being said about them. Hopefully, we can create positive, welcoming environments and really bring this next generation along, and really our future leaders of our organizations.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really a fascinating conversation about multi-generational. And for all the audience, if they're interested in having you speak at their organization around these ideas of how to better incorporate Gen Z values into the traditional system, how can they do that? How can they follow your socials, check out your work, etc.?
Absolutely. I'd love to connect with y'all. I speak at conferences, I do leadership events, manager trainings. My name is Luke Goetting, Goetting. So it's an unusual last name. I'm usually pretty easy to find. LinkedIn is the top spot that I seem to spend so much time. My website is lukegoetting.com. Would love to help work with your teams and your events to really create positive intergenerational dynamics. And again, start welcoming this next generation in, because very soon, literally by next year, it's Gen Z is already going to make up 1/4, like 25% of the workforce. So they're coming fast. And a lot of you mentioned, Chris, like a lot of companies, they haven't, especially with the baby boomer generation working longer, they haven't really curated that next generation of leaders yet. And so
Yeah.
the time is very much now to start make sure that institutional knowledge gets shared and gets passed on in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And what a fantastic way to end it. And for all the audience, be sure to give Luke's socials a like and follow, and his contact information will be in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.